At my sister's company gala, she grinned and said, "This is my sister, she tried starting a business." Cute, right? Everyone laughed. I nodded, until her CFO raised an eyebrow at me and said, "You're that girl from the pitch meeting?" The gala was everything I expected it to be: fancy, over the top, full of people who looked like they had their lives together, as they sipped on champagne and networked like pros. I was just another face in the crowd. My sister, Jenna, had invited me as an afterthought, and to be honest, I wasn't exactly thrilled about attending. But my parents had insisted, and they always wanted me to make an effort, so there I was. Jenna had been the golden child for as long as I could remember. It was never spoken outright, but everyone knew she was the favorite. She was the successful one, the one who was always put on a pedestal. I, on the other hand, had never quite found my footing. I'd tried to start a business a few years ago, a small tech startup, but it failed miserably. Jenna had been the first one to tell me it wasn't going to work. She even helped shut me down in a way that felt like a public humiliation. Standing in the back of the ballroom now, I could feel that old familiar knot forming in my stomach. I didn't belong here. My sister was up on stage, her radiant smile lighting up the room. She was in her element, making small talk with her investors, her colleagues, and clients. Everyone seemed to hang on her every word. "Good evening, everyone." Jenna's voice rang out, and the crowd fell silent. "I want to introduce someone very special to me, my sister, Rebecca." There was a moment of hesitation in the room as eyes turned toward me. I gave a stiff, tight-lipped smile and raised my glass, trying to look composed. But inside, my heart was pounding. I'd never been comfortable in these situations. People didn't look at me the way they looked at Jenna. They didn't see me as a successful businesswoman or even as a professional. I was just Jenna's sister, and that's how they'd always treat me. "This is my sister," Jenna continued, her voice carrying a bit of playful sarcasm. "She tried starting a business." Cute, right? The room erupted in polite laughter. I could feel my cheeks flush. It wasn't the first time she'd made a joke at my expense, but it still stung. I forced myself to smile, nodding, as if I was in on the joke too. But I wasn't. I never had been. Jenna didn't seem to notice my discomfort. She was too busy soaking in the attention. Her eyes scanned the room as if she were the queen of a palace, and everyone else was just there to admire her. My stomach churned, but I kept my cool, pretending like I wasn't affected by her words. But then, something unexpected happened. A man standing near the front of the room, someone I didn't recognize, looked over at me. He was older, dressed in a sharp suit, and his eyes narrowed as if he was trying to place me. It was subtle at first, but his gaze lingered for a beat longer than it should have. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "You're that girl from the pitch meeting?" I froze. There was a split second of complete silence. Everyone around us went quiet as I tried to process what had just happened. The pitch meeting. The one I'd had with Jenna's company a year ago. The one where I'd gotten rejected in front of all those high-level investors. I didn't know who this man was at first, but when his face lit up with recognition, I felt a sinking feeling in my chest. He wasn't just anyone. He was Sean Calloway, the CFO of Jenna's company. I couldn't believe it. After all these years, after all the rejection, here he was, standing in front of me at my sister's gala. The recognition hit me hard. I hadn't thought about that pitch meeting in a long time. When I'd walked into that room a year ago, I had felt so confident. I had put everything into that presentation, poured my heart into it. But I left that meeting humiliated, crushed by the way they dismissed my idea and me. Jenna had even been there, sitting at the table, her face full of polite indifference. Now, standing in front of me, Sean seemed to remember me as clearly as if it had been yesterday. "You're Rebecca, right?" he said, his voice steady, but there was something in his tone that made my pulse race. "You pitched that startup last year. The tech business, right?" I was stunned. The room was watching us now. I felt like I was under a spotlight, my mind racing. What was happening? Why was he bringing this up in front of everyone? Jenna's smile faltered for a moment. Her eyes shifted from me to Sean, and I could see the tension in her face. She hadn't expected this. Neither had I. Yeah, she did, Jenna said quickly, almost dismissively. It didn't exactly work out. Her words felt like a slap, but I didn't say anything. I couldn't. All I could do was stand there, my stomach in knots. Sean didn't seem bothered by Jenna's coldness. Instead, he continued looking at me, his expression thoughtful. Actually, now that I think about it, he said, his voice lower, almost to himself. I remember that pitch. It was a good idea. Could have worked if the timing had been better. I blinked, surprised by his words. Was he actually saying this in front of everyone? Had he really thought my idea had potential? Jenna's smile turned into something more forced. Oh, really? She said, her tone almost mocking. You think so? Sean didn't back down. Yeah, I do. I'm not saying it would have been easy, but there was something there. Something worth exploring. The room had gone completely silent. People were whispering now, clearly intrigued by what Sean was saying. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Had I just gotten a public endorsement from one of the top people at Jenna's company? Was this a joke? But before I could process it all, Sean turned his attention back to Jenna. If you're serious about growth, about staying ahead in the market, you might want to reconsider your approach. A fresh perspective can make a huge difference. Maybe it's time to take some risks. You never know what could happen. Jenna looked like she'd just been hit with a ton of bricks. Her mouth opened and closed as if she didn't know how to respond. The confident, poised woman who had ruled the room just moments ago suddenly looked uncertain. For a brief moment, I saw her vulnerability, but it was quickly masked by a forced smile. I couldn't tell if I felt relief or anger. It was surreal. I had just been humiliated in front of everyone by my sister, and now this man, someone I barely knew, was publicly standing up for me. Well, I said, my voice shaky but firm, maybe it's time I actually did something about it. Jenna's eyes narrowed, and for a second, I could see the rivalry between us flare up again. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by me. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The night continued, but it felt like the air had shifted. Jenna kept her distance, probably nursing her wounded ego, while I, for the first time, felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet. But the real question now was, could I actually pull it off? Could I rebuild my startup, with or without Jenna's help? The next few days were a blur. I barely had time to process what had happened at the gala before I found myself with Sean's business card in my hand, his words echoing in my mind. He had mentioned revisiting my idea, perhaps even offering some backing if I could make it work this time around. But I wasn't sure if he was being genuine, or if it was all just some sort of corporate politeness meant to placate me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the air that night. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being taken seriously. I didn't reach out to Sean immediately. I wasn't that impulsive anymore, not after everything that had happened with my failed business attempt. I'd learned the hard way to tread carefully, to weigh my options before making big decisions. Instead, I spent a couple of days replaying the gala in my mind, especially Jenna's reaction. She had looked thrown off by Sean's comments, almost as if she didn't know how to handle the shift in power. And that was something new. My sister, the person who had always held the reins, the one who had controlled every narrative around me, was suddenly on the defensive. When I finally called Sean, I did it with a mixture of hesitation and excitement. I wasn't sure if I was ready to revisit the world of startups, or if I even had what it took to succeed this time. But deep down, I knew I couldn't walk away from the opportunity. Rebecca, Sean's voice was calm and collected as usual. I'm glad you called. I've been thinking about what you said at the gala, I started, unsure of where to go next. And I don't know if you were just being polite, but I'm open to hearing more. There was a brief pause before Sean responded. I wasn't being polite, Rebecca. I genuinely think there's something to your idea. I know Jenna didn't take it seriously, but that doesn't mean there isn't potential there. You've got to take risks if you want to get anywhere in this game. And from what I remember of your pitch, you had the guts to dream big. That counts for a lot. His words were enough to give me a sliver of hope, a hope that I had buried a long time ago. The idea of trying again, of standing on my own feet without Jenna's shadow hanging over me, felt liberating. But the reality was, starting over wasn't going to be easy. I was barely getting by, still licking my wounds from the failed business. And yet, something about Sean's confidence in me made me feel like I could do it, like maybe I wasn't completely out of my depth. I'm in, I said after a long pause. I'll need your help, but I'm in. We agreed to meet a few days later, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of urgency. Maybe I could build something. Maybe this time, it could be different. When I showed up at the office for my first meeting with Sean, I wasn't sure what to expect. I had spent the past few days digging into my old business plan, trying to piece together what went wrong the first time. There were so many lessons learned in failure, and I had a lot to make up for. But this time I wasn't going in blindly. This time I had a mentor, someone who understood the business world better than I ever could. And that was Sean. The office space was sleek, modern, everything I expected from a successful tech company. Sean's office was immaculate, as if it had been perfectly curated to create an image of control and calmness. When I walked in, he stood from behind his desk, offering a firm handshake. "Good to see you, Rebecca," he said, his tone warm but businesslike. "Let's dive in." I sat across from him, my notebook in hand, trying to steady my nerves. The last time I'd been in a meeting like this, I was full of excitement and optimism, only to have it all crash down. This time, I wasn't so naive. But I was determined. More than ever, I knew I had to prove myself. We spent the next few hours going over the details. Sean didn't sugarcoat anything, and he didn't offer empty promises. Instead, he asked tough questions, ones that forced me to dig deep and be honest about what I wanted to accomplish. "Your idea has merit, but you need to define your target market more clearly," he said, scribbling notes as I spoke. "You've got a great product, but who exactly is going to buy it? Who's your audience?" I paused, thinking about the question. I hadn't been asked that before, not in the same way. The last time, it had been about the product, about how good it was and how it would change the world. This time, it felt real. It felt like the difference between success and failure was in these details. "I need to dig deeper," I admitted. "I think I was too broad last time. I was trying to reach everyone, but not really connecting with anyone." Sean nodded. "Exactly. And that's where I can help you. We'll figure out who your audience is, narrow it down, and then we'll build everything around them." For the first time, I felt like I was speaking to someone who wasn't just trying to be polite, but who genuinely wanted to help me succeed. His feedback was constructive, and it didn't feel like a lecture. It felt like a partnership. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, spreadsheets, and strategy sessions. Sean was relentless, pushing me to think critically about every aspect of my business, from the product development to the marketing plan. I realized just how much I had underestimated the complexities of building a business. There were so many details to manage, so many decisions to make. But for the first time, I felt like I was on the right path. And yet, even as things started to click into place, I couldn't help but wonder about Jenna. She hadn't reached out to me since the gala, not once. Was she avoiding me? Was she trying to ignore the fact that I was taking this second chance seriously? The old part of me wanted to reach out, to tell her what I was doing, to show her that I could make it work. But the other part of me, the stronger part, knew I didn't need her approval. I was doing this for me. I didn't need her validation anymore. But then, a week before we were set to launch my business under new terms, Jenna called. I stared at my phone for a moment, unsure of whether I should pick up. It had been so long since we'd had a real conversation. The last time I had seen her, she'd barely acknowledged my existence. And now, she was calling me? Hello? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Rebecca, Jenna's voice was cool, but there was a hint of something else. Something that almost sounded like regret. I'd been thinking a lot about the gala and what happened. About everything. I know I've been hard on you in the past, and I want to apologize for that. I didn't mean to make you feel small. I don't know why I did that. I took a deep breath. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, the anger I had carried for so long, the way she had crushed my dreams before they had a chance to take off. But another part of me, one that had grown stronger over the last few weeks, knew that I didn't need to carry that anger anymore. Thanks for calling, Jenna, I said, my voice calm but firm. But I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm doing things my way now. There was silence on the other end of the line, and then a soft sigh. I know, she said quietly. I see that. And I'm proud of you, Rebecca. I really am. It felt like the world had shifted just a little. Maybe we weren't going to be the perfect sisters we had once been, but there was something there now, an understanding. Thanks, I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I appreciate that. The call with Jenna, though unexpected, left me feeling strangely calm. I didn't need her approval, but hearing her words, hearing her acknowledge my growth, even in her own way, gave me the closure I didn't realize I was missing. I wasn't the same person who had stepped into that meeting room a year ago, humiliated and crushed by her laughter. I was no longer the timid sister who had lived in her shadow. I had something to prove now, not just to Jenna, but to myself. I hung up the phone with a quiet sense of accomplishment, a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. There was still work to be done, but it wasn't about proving Jenna wrong anymore. It was about proving that I could stand on my own. A week passed, and things moved fast. My startup was officially relaunching, with new branding, a refined pitch, and a clearer focus on our target audience. Sean was still in my corner, guiding me through the final preparations, but I was starting to feel like I was in control. My vision for the business had come together in ways I hadn't anticipated, and it felt like everything was finally falling into place. Then, the launch day arrived. It was a sunny morning in early June. I woke up feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. My heart was pounding in my chest as I made my way to the office, where everything would unfold. This wasn't just a business launch, it was the culmination of everything I had worked toward, the moment that would define whether my second chance would be a success or a failure. But more than that, it was a moment that would show Jenna, and everyone who had ever doubted me, that I could do this. The press event we had organized was a modest affair. No grand gala like the one at Jenna's company. Just a small, intimate gathering of investors, industry professionals, and media. The room was filled with a quiet buzz as people networked and waited for the presentation to begin. I could feel my nerves creeping up on me, but I was determined to hold it together. Sean gave me a reassuring nod before stepping aside, letting me take center stage. Good morning, everyone, I said, stepping to the podium. My voice felt steady, even though my hands were shaking slightly. I looked out at the crowd, seeing some familiar faces, but most of them were strangers, people who were here to hear my story, to see if my business had real potential. Thank you all for coming today. I know some of you are familiar with my story, and for those who aren't, I'm Rebecca. I'm here to tell you that failure isn't the end of the road, it's just the beginning of something better. I paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. This was it. This was my moment. The presentation went smoothly, and the more I spoke, the more confident I became. I watched as people took notes, asked questions, and seemed genuinely interested in the new direction I was taking with my business. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly being heard. I wasn't the person I had been a year ago, the person who had walked into a room full of industry leaders with no idea of what I was doing. I had grown, I had learned, and I was ready to take on the world. The event wrapped up, and Sean was the first to congratulate me. You nailed it, Rebecca, he said, his smile genuine. I knew you had it in you. But as I was basking in the success of the day, I felt a strange tension in the air. My sister Jenna was at the back of the room, lingering near the exit. I hadn't seen her since the gala, and I hadn't expected to see her here at my event. But there she was, her eyes on me, her arms crossed in what looked like guarded curiosity. I didn't know why she had come. Was she here to support me? Or was she just showing up to see if I would fail? I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach, and made my way over to where she was standing. I could feel the weight of the years between us, the tension in the air as we came face to face. "Rebecca," she said quietly, her voice softer than I had expected. "I have to admit, I didn't think you could pull it off." I looked at her, trying to keep my composure. "Well, I did." Jenna didn't say anything for a moment. Instead, she studied me, really looked at me, for the first time in a long while. And for the first time in years, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. There was no mockery, no superiority, no condescension. There was something closer to respect. "You've grown, Rebecca," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. I didn't see it before, but I do now. It was the first real acknowledgement I had ever received from her, and it hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't apologizing for everything that had happened, she wasn't going to, but she was admitting, at least in her own way, that I wasn't the failure she had always made me out to be. I wasn't the joke anymore. "Thanks," I said, my voice steady but filled with a quiet emotion. "That means more than you know." Jenna nodded and then, without another word, turned to leave. I watched her walk away, and a strange sense of closure washed over me. She hadn't apologized for her past actions. She hadn't admitted that she had wronged me. But somehow, this small, unexpected acknowledgement, was enough. I didn't need her to be proud of me. I had already proven that I could do this on my own. And that, in itself, was the sweetest kind of revenge. The next few months were a whirlwind. The business continued to grow, slowly but steadily. We secured some key investments, and my product began to gain traction in the market. I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had already overcome the hardest part, the doubts, the fears, the people who thought I couldn't make it. I had proven them wrong. And somewhere, in the back of my mind, I knew that Jenna had watched it all unfold. She had seen me rise, seen me succeed, and she had seen me do it without her help. That was my revenge, not in the way I had once imagined it, but in the quiet satisfaction of standing on my own, without needing anyone to validate me.